All right, good evening. I'm Lisa Carrico, Program Director for Missouri Humanities. We are a member-supported organization, and our mission is dedicated to enriching lives and strengthening communities by connecting Missourians with the people, places, and ideas that shape our society. Thank you for joining our annual reading in celebration of the release of Proud to Be, Writing by American Warriors, Volume 12. Since 2011, we have partnered with organizations across the state to provide veterans, service members, and military-connected families with an outlet for self-expression through writing. Our veterans programs include writing workshops and this annual publication and reading. Together, these programs encourage hundreds of veterans each year to tell their stories. Volume 12 features 56 contributors from all over the nation who have graciously shared their military-related stories in the forms of essays, fiction, poetry, and photography. The creative works contained within Proud to Be offer a wholly unique insight into the human perspective of military service by bringing to light stories revolving around our nation's military experience. It provides real-world awareness of the complexities of service, sacrifice, and duty, and we as the readers gain a more intimate understanding of the experiences and challenges faced by those who have served. Tonight, we'll hear from 8 contributors who will read from their original writings, followed by a roundtable discussion with 4 participating readers. Our moderator, Jason Poudrier, is a novelist, essayist, poet, and Purple Heart recipient of the Iraq War, and has been published in several volumes of Proud to Be and was the poetry judge for Volume 9. With Poudrier's connection to the anthology series and his experiences in military-focused writing, I know he has been preparing for a thoughtful and engaging discussion. Please be aware that at times the reading may contain strong language and describe mature situations. Viewer discretion is advised. I'd like to thank the many people who have made this volume possible, from the book contributors to the judges and to those who are tuning in. A very, very, very special thanks to our editor, Dr. James Brubaker of Southeast Missouri State University Press. We're 12 volumes in. It's pretty exciting. Anyways, I'm going to turn this over to James. He'll be introducing tonight's readers and panelists.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Lisa. Thanks to Missouri Humanities. I love this event every year. I love working on this book. It's always an honor to work on the book and to be here. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first reader. Jillian Dambach McGahn is an author, Navy veteran, and the winner of the 2020 Colonel Darren L. Wright Memorial Writing Awards. Her work appears or is forthcoming in Boston Review, The Rat-Bearing Tree, Line of Advance, and is anthologized in Our Best War Stories from Middle West Press 2022. She lives in Annapolis, Maryland with her family. Her debut story collection, Midwatch, will be published by Split Lip Press in 2024. Welcome, Jillian.
Thank you. Tonight, I'll be reading the beginning of my short story, Convergence. Despite the calm surface, the Gulf of Aden exhaled and inhaled in large swells. Our target, a blue and white fishing dhow, seemed to disappear against the clear afternoon sky. 5 silhouettes scurried across the deck, tossing objects over the side as they ran. The harsh glare of the sun effaced their finer features, reducing the dhow's crew to shadows shifting against a blinding backdrop. 1 short and burly, 3 tall and lanky. 1 figure looked much smaller than the others. Overhead, the SH-60 assigned to our ship circled the dhow, spreading wrinkles across the water's surface. The air crew issued commands from a megaphone like a wrathful god. You have been identified by the United States Navy as a vessel of interest. Slow your speed and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Stay alert, gents. We're not boarding if it looks too hot, I directed over the net. Crammed next to the 11 other members of my team on our small boat, the pungent odor of exhaust emitted by the boat's diesel engine nauseated me. Come on, man. We haven't shot up one of these boats all deployment, Edwards replied. Bet it would burn like a mother with that wooden hull. I smirked involuntarily, then pinched the inside of my arm until a welt emerged. We're not shooting up dhows for the hell of it, I said. Through my binoculars, I watched as a tiny figure sprinted across the deck. I lost sight of him, regained it, then lost it again as the rib bucked in the rotor wash. Besides, it looks like there's a kid on board. We hadn't seen children during any of our previous searches. Surly teenagers, sure, though the harsh living conditions in the Horn of Africa made all inhabitants appear much older. It seemed as if childhood ceased to exist in this corner of the world. Hey, any fewer bullets for kids, Tyler said. Know the difference between a truck full of bricks and one full of dead babies, ma'am? Cut it out, Tyler, I said. You don't have to unload bricks with a pitchfork. Those aren't funny, I replied. A phantom cramp caused me to curl forward slightly. Actually, ma'am, people can't help but laugh about terrible things, Edward said. It's an emotional defense thing. Oh, good, I said. We have a philosopher on board. Lighten up, princess. Dead baby jokes are hilarious, Harrison said over the net. The only thing funnier than a dead baby is one in a clown costume. Silence on the net, I ordered. You all need to get your heads right for this boarding. Turning to Chief Jimenez, our team's senior enlisted, I asked him, did your teams act this way when you were in Iraq? Worse, Chief responded, but they saw some real serious shit out there. The worse it got, the more they needed to let loose. All this team does is act mean in front of a bunch of Somali fishermen. We all have our ways of coping, I said, looking away. Mine had been luring men I met at beachside bars to the back of my car before deployment. The ones I chose had no clue what I did during the day, all the responsibilities I carried. Hell, most of them never knew my real name. It made it all the more delicious to kick them out of the car before they could zip their jeans. Watching their smiles disappear felt more satisfying than the act itself. In the morning, I'd return to being the valiant Lieutenant Bloom who scales the sides of ships and speaks to kids at local schools about the ways the Navy is saving the world, and dons the relentless weight of perfection every time she puts on her uniform. The nocturnal woman existed as a separate self, one unsheathed whenever that weight became too heavy to bear. Most people, friends, teachers, my own parents, thought the concept of me joining the military was outrageous. They also discounted the elbows I threw at the starting line of cross-country races as adolescent volatility, laughed when I tripped through strangers, or stomped on the sandaled feet of men who tried to jump in line before me at concerts. No one knew how liberated I felt in those moments, nor would they ever. The revelation would only repulse them. How could anyone comprehend this urge compelling me to rip the world apart and weave together a new one from the frayed edges? Yet these urges didn't control me. I controlled them, the referee who keeps them separated, assigning each self to her designated space. I had to. The possibility of their convergence terrified me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great. Next up, Dale Eichmeyer grew up in Southern California, and after completing Army Reserve Officer Training Corps at San Jose State University in 1978, he received his commission as an air defense artilleryman. His 30-year career spanned the Cold War to the War on Terrorism, with service around the globe, including Germany, Bosnia, Korea, and Iraq. He is a combat veteran of the First Gulf War and the Iraq War. After active duty retirement, he taught at the Army's Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and is now retired from teaching, designated as an associate professor emeritus. He resides with his wife, Barbara, in Lansing, Kansas. Let's welcome Dale.
Thank you very much for the introduction. This is Guardians on the Wall. It's a metaphor for my military career. There was no clarion call when I took my place on the wall. No September 11, no December 7. Just history whispering in my ear. Peace, then war, war, then peace. It's a leaf turning in the wind, and the wind always blows. History nudged my soul, so I climbed the wall. I stood proud, my armor bright and clean, an unsure youth full of eagerness. Okay, I'll continue. I stood proud, my armor bright and clean, an unsure youth full of eagerness. Other guardians' armors bore a patina of experience. Their dull, indented armor comforted me. The red bear from the east rose up and roared. We stepped forward and stood shoulder to shoulder. Along the wall, we lifted our spears higher. The wind calmed and the bear turned away. The commander of the watch approached me. Guardian, your watch is done. You may step down. I looked and remembered history's whisper. Thank you, sir, but I'll stay. A bull came to the wall. A lamb struggled under his bloody hoof. This shall not stand. Free the land, our leader shouted. The bull laughed. So in a storm we charged across oil-soaked ground, my armor no longer clean and bright. A young guardian asked, how do you decide when to step forward and fight? I replied, we do not choose. Trust the people's choice to decide. They trust us to be ready. The young guardian looked to the sky where an eagle soared, but what if they choose badly? We still go. Let history judge their wisdom. A red and blue dragon from the north hissed, threatening a sea of fire on the land of the morning calm. We stepped forward and shouted at the wind, Kapshi, Kapshi Da. The dragon withdrew, but said, the wind always blows. I'll come again. The twin towers fell and many felt the wind and climbed the wall. We fought where it blew us, rested, and then stepped forward again. The leaf now seemed one-sided, war with no peace. How long will this leaf blow in the wind? My armor now dull, scoured by the wind. A hand on my shoulder, a gentle squeeze. Guardian, you have served well, but it is time. I stepped down, proud, knowing I was ready whenever the wind blew. Looking back, I saw a figure climbing the wall. He turned and stood in bright, clean armor. He said, don't worry, Dad, I'll stand watch now. I understand the wind always blows. Thank you.
Great job. Thanks so much. Victoria Garton is the author of 3 books of poetry, Kisses in the Raw Night, Pout of Tangerine Tango, and Venice Comes Clean. Though her husband served from 1968 to 1970 and her dad in World War II, her poems concern her Uncle Bob's experience as a World War II POW. He lived 100 years and shared many memories. Let's welcome Victoria.
I'll start again. I was very happy to have 3 of my poems about my Uncle Bob in the volume number 12. I'm reading the one that was given an honorable mention, and it's called Hummingbird Bailout. It was written following a visit to my Uncle Bob, in which we talked about his war experiences and his experiences of POW, but we also talked about a little hummingbird that came to rest outside the window. And so the poem combines these 2 issues. Hummingbird Bailout for Uncle Bob. It took until he reached 100 to see a hummingbird at rest, perched on the sunflower just outside the care center. He was surprised at the stub of a tail feather. A tiny body minus feathers wouldn't make a mouthful for a cat. The wings in motion blurred, so they hardly existed, yet suspended that tiny bird in air, created an illusion of stability. Like wings of the B-17, stable until rake of machine gun fire, like 1,000 hummingbirds drilling holes in the sky. Last he saw of the flying fortress was a wing tilting earthward as he floated through bullets, shells, and exploding planes. In Stalag Luft 1 as prisoner 5753, he would have loved to see a hummingbird at rest, a touch of beauty in an austere place, a mouthful of protein for a starving 20-year-old. Thank you. Once again, it was Hummingbird Bailout.
Great job. Thank you so much. Following a career as a U.S. Army musician, Gordon Coppola earned an MFA in creative writing at the University of Tampa and calls Bremerton, Washington home. His poetry has appeared in Rattle, Post Road Magazine, District Lit, The Main Street Rag, Proud to Be, and other splendid publications. Let's welcome Gordon.
Quick shout out to my sister in Texas, a veteran herself who served for several years as a Navy nurse back in the day. Never conjure your hero from the grave. Stabbed to death by your drummer, I'm afraid, I answer James Reese Europe, catching him up on the post-1919 world. Our lives parallel in eerily similar ways, I tell him. We both commanded Army bands in combat. And did you choke in clouds of poison gas, he asks. 100,000 doughboys dead from machine guns, artillery, and influenza. Were you assigned to the French, your skin and the pigments of your Harlem Hellfighter musicians preventing full American service? Iraq was plenty rough, I say, jumping to a quote about him being the Martin Luther King of music, adding context that he and MLK were both revered as leaders of their people, omitting the assassination bit. History records, I continue, that James helped to father jazz, inexorably connecting him to me again, because I'm on tour near Dayton now with the U.S. Army Jazz Ambassadors. And did you build your orchestra from scratch, become the toast of New York City, compose, conduct, and innovate, all the while blazing an arts and culture revolution, Europe asks? Not precisely, I say, but for every town on tour, I write a poem to recite at the show's midpoint. It gives the players time to rest their chops. Crowds applaud these rhyming novelties, and I've written an ode in your honor. I've written an ode in your honor, and would you like to hear it, Jim? Maybe later. I reveal the truth that I'm 6 feet tall. Biographers report that he was too. Photos show we both wore glasses. Glancing my direction, he agrees about the glasses and the height. Thank you.
Nice job. Thanks so much. Sin Kitchen is an associate professor of English at Knox College, where she teaches creative writing and literature. She is the author of 10 Tongues Stories and also writes nonfiction and poems, some of which appear or are forthcoming in Fourth River, American Writers Review, Poetry South, Burning Wood Literary, and Cutleaf. Kitchen makes her home in Forgotonia, a downstate region on the Illinois prairie. Let's welcome Sin.
Hi, thank you, James. I'm reading from my essay titled Nothing Could Prepare Me, and I think the subject matter is pretty self-explanatory. Nothing could prepare me. It took 4 years of fundraising and a solid 6 months of group planning to organize my son's high school band trip to Disney World. Travel agents, 27 chaperones, medical releases, room assignments, 16 bus drivers, an overnight security guard, 3 band directors, and a legion of band parents all focused their energies on a 6-day cross-country trip over spring break. Somehow, I was selected to chaperone. I have no genetic predisposition for order. I don't come wired to plan ahead. More than once on that trip, I was swept up, separated from my group, and caught in an undulating ribbon of humanity, clueless about which way to go. Others had plotted their paths through the parks, organized fast passes, and scheduled themselves for 2 and 3 stage shows in a row with just enough time to sprint to the next amphitheater and score a good seat. Not me. I sat on park benches and stared in wonder at the spectacle of it all. I'd check in with my student group at appointed times that someone else had planned, and then I'd wander off again in search of something that I trusted I would recognize when I saw it. Call it dumb luck, call it whatever you like, but somehow I survived. While I was at Disney World with 167 members of my middle son's high school marching band, my 19-year-old Marine son called to tell me he was on a California military base writing his will. I was lollygagging around the bends of Splash Mountain, and he was appointing me his power of attorney and doling out precious few earthly belongings to his siblings. The Corvette to Joe, to Bailey his extensive music and movie collection, his fighting gear to Jake. Blood money, or as the government likes to call it, life insurance, would get divvied up amongst us in varying percentages. I told my son at his going away party while we were in a dark roller rink skating through droplets of light flung from a spinning disco ball that if he had any special instructions, he needed to write them down. I wasn't capable of asking specific questions, only thinking them. I don't know if he knew what I meant when I said special instructions, but he nodded and said, yeah, okay, so I left it at that. What I couldn't say was, where do you want to be buried? What songs should we play at your funeral? Are there any rituals you'd find meaningful? Who do you want to speak? Do I have to choose pallbearers, or do the Marines take care of that? I've spoken with other military parents. My morbid thinking isn't so extraordinary. They ask their sons and daughters questions too, harbor the same dark thoughts. Some plan their child's funeral before they deploy, write it all down after dry-eyed conversations, so that in the event it becomes a reality, they aren't pressed to make crucial judgments. At Disney, I was impressed and grateful there were people in this world who could divine that somebody will forget to bring white socks for their band uniform, who had the wherewithal to load trash bags and toilet paper onto the bus, who remembered sunscreen, who could pack an 18-foot moving truck with 200 band instruments, garment bags, helmet boxes, pairs of shoes, and a sewing kit. Without obsessive compulsive planners and organizers, people like me would have been walking in circles. One mother said, "Don't you know what you want to do while you're there?" I said, "I don't have to with people like you around." Call me apathetic. I did not ride the rock and roller coaster or the Tower of Terror. I did not know I wasn't going to ride those rides until I stood at the base of them and listened to the occupants scream bloody murder. I didn't know until the moment of decision. Prior to that instant, it didn't matter. Frankly, by the end of the band trip, all the organization was getting to me, so much structure and scheduling and running through crowds to beat the clock. One night, while sitting on the bus waiting for everyone to gather at our predetermined meeting spot, my Marine son called to say Uncle Sam had put him through 10 OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, in case you, like me, needed to ask, briefs that day, and stabbed him in the arm with an anthrax vaccine. Like those doggone band parents, the military has a system, pushing the Marines through health screenings and last will and testament writing as easily as we had managed to bring home the same number of kids we'd left with. During the interminable hours spent crammed on that bus, I heard a song that might have made a good funeral song. At least that's the flash of thought I had while listening to it, but soon after I forgot what it was, and I certainly didn't write it down. I made a mental note to ask my son how he felt about that kind of thing, but I ultimately couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't force myself to talk to him about what he wanted me to do in the event the war claimed him. Not that I didn't care what happened to him, but that I didn't care what happened to me if something happened to him, if I'd already seen him for the last time. I understand that it would be to my benefit to plan things out a little better, to organize an outline, but I couldn't plan enough at Disney to feed myself, much less that horde of high schoolers. If something happened to my son in Iraq, I guessed I would deal with it then. But don't expect me to bury my kid, not even in my imagination. I don't plan the ends of my stories when I begin writing, and I refuse to plan his. I know enough to know that nothing could prepare me. Nothing could prepare. Nothing could. Nothing. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Ann Nigendorf is writer and editor at the Kansas City Public Library and a Navy veteran. Her work has been published in local, national, and international publications, including National Public Radio, the Smithsonian Magazine, Publishers Weekly, Lit Hub, Electric Literature, the Saturday Evening Post, and Reasons to be Cheerful. She's the author of Secret Kansas City and Kansas City Scavenger, both from Reedy Press. She holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Let's welcome Anne.
Thank you. I'm going to read an excerpt from an essay that is itself an excerpt from the book I'm working on called Basic, John Denver and the Great Books in Navy Boot Camp. I think the only thing to know is that I'm in the Blue Jacket Choir in Navy Boot Camp, and we've just performed at an off-base church on the 4th of July. We closed the service with the Star-Spangled Banner, a song I'd never listened to carefully, even at that moment, though I felt pangs of pride because Francis Scott Key and I were alumni of the same college. Outside after the service, men wearing t-shirts with fill in the blank, dad, basketball dad, University of Chicago dad, dog dad, across their chests stood under tents and operated snow cone machines, popcorn machines, and cotton candy machines. I almost panicked in the face of the abundance. We were free to have whatever we'd like after weeks of eating what was ladled out. I mentally consumed a snow cone before it was my turn in line and decided it was too risky in my white uniform. Though it was now nearly dusk, the temperature was in the 90s. The choir split up and we lost ourselves among the strangers who hadn't yet learned to regard all uniformed creatures as heroes. People my parents' age were curious about me. I talked about my family back in Kansas, about how I'd just been in grad school in May, and now this uniform, this other life. Then, much too soon, the choir director rounded us up, and again we drowsed into the cushions of the tour bus and headed back to Great Lakes. Returning to the compartment of wrung-out, half-asleep women in their bunks did not feel like a homecoming. The thermostat read 92 degrees. I brushed my teeth and climbed the ladder to my vinyl mattress. Midway through taps, I noticed lights flickering behind me through the birthing-length, 2-foot-high window that ran along the ceiling. I rolled over and saw through the screened slit in the frosted glass that served to keep us from suffocating or escaping fireworks. Another burst and another. And taps played still, low and sad. In the light of the next burst, I looked down my side of the berthing, and all 25 girls were positioned as I was, silently watching what they could see of the show. The 25 on the other side of the compartment were unable to see for themselves, but by the light of the next burst, I made out that many of them lay propped on their elbows, watching us watch the fireworks over the hills of their toes. I thought about the Star-Spangled Banner again, and for the first time considered the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, giving proof through the night that our flag was still there. I imagined all my other shipmates on the base also craning their necks to see the display. What did we hope would remain after this ordeal? What was our flag? Surely each person had some notion they were hanging on to through this strange time. I wanted to see that I hadn't become someone new and unfamiliar, though I'd clearly felt some becoming underway. I wasn't sure if I could be robbed of who I was, but I was scared of that loss of self in the way I was scared of dying. I was scared I would drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak, that I'd buy into what the Navy was selling me, that I wouldn't be able to hold myself apart from the giant that was indiscriminately folding me into itself. Wasn't the performance at the church proof enough of that transition? It could have been the 2 naps on the bus. It could have been all the excitement, but for the first time all summer, sleep didn't come quickly. I lay in bed playing a John Denver record in my head, playing Spirit. I found the words and melodies intact to the song order too. He sang about trying to do what's right and trying to be as he was expected to be, but still getting lost. Haven't we all gotten lost? And asking for help as the sky fell on him. He asked what to do with himself, where he might hide. He sang of his lover loving him just right, of comforting him and moving him. He sang of feeling like a sad song and of being alone. By the time I got to one called The Wings That Fly Us Home, I knew I'd gotten a little loopy. I smiled to myself because John's songs were so cheesy, and I always thought this one was one of the cheesiest. It was the line about a dream that really did it. You're a prophet, let's say. I'm a mountain, another one of those equivalencies. Then you touch me, mountain me, with a flower while I'm asleep, and whoa, I wake up holding a flower. Mind blown. But part of why I loved him was he didn't get it right every time, even with songs like this one that he hadn't written himself. On this night, though, part of my eye rolling was preemptive, in self-defense, because I couldn't stop the rest of the song from rolling through my head, and really refused to even try because it was late and I'd gotten so lonely and I'd left myself so vulnerable, unintentionally baring my neck to a superpower. And because I felt weak and self-indulgent and just wanted John to fill my head and take me somewhere else, like maybe to my bedroom and marry him. I let the music swell and clenched my eyes. Oh, John sang, that a vision of his beloved's goodness was what sustained him, and he invited me, to take his hand if I found myself alone. I am alone, John. Even in my previous life, away at the college of my heart, I lay awake in another cinder block room, also totally alone and choked up at this part. Take my hand, John sang directly to me from the grave, from my childhood. A crescendo rose like a watery wave. The yearning soul, a timpani boomed. You're never really alone. And damn it, love will fly you home. He didn't sing damn it. I was obliged to repeat the line about flying home 3 times because that's how John did it in the recording. And by the second repetition, my chest and throat were blocked with ache, and I tried to keep the tears from hitting my plastic pillow and steady my breath so that the night watch wouldn't check on me. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much. Army veteran Elaine Little deployed to Cuba, Bosnia, and Afghanistan. Her publishing credits include Proud to Be Volumes 10 and 11, Consequence Forum, Line of Advance, and the upcoming anthology Sisters in Arms, published by Blue Dragon Press. In March, her work Bitter Tea was read by the actor Sharon Stone at Honor in Their Words, an event held at Hollywood Legion Post 43, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam. Welcome, Elaine.
All right, thank you. Thanks to all our viewers, and thanks to my family and friends who tuned in, and for Proud to Be for always being so supportive. This is an excerpt from my essay, Bitter Tea. First, I asked for leftovers in anticipation of the interrogation of the only female prisoner at the interrogation facility. Scavenged Afghan food from an officer's farewell party. The meat was stringy, but it sure beat prison food. Prisoners were served American food in odd combinations: granola bars, Gatorade, Cheese Whiz. The granola bars were awfully hard, and many prisoners' teeth were decayed or missing. They crushed them up before they ate them, causing an awful ruckus. Second, I made tea, not the tea bag kind, real Afghan tea. I portioned out enough to fill an imaginary tea bag 6 times over, hoping for a smooth and aromatic brew, like the tea I'd been served by the Afghan interpreters. It seemed impossible to screw this up. All this preparation because the female prisoner, Paxima, was due to be released after being held for over a year because she was crazy. This was much better than being a terrorist. Whether or not there was a clinical diagnosis was moot. It was her ticket out. I worked 12-hour days as an interrogator. Interrogations were scheduled from approximately 8 to 4. After that, you typed up detailed reports. When you were done, you monitored the red numbers on the digital clock set to local and Greenwich Mean Time next to the door in the TOC, the Tactical Operations Center. The story was Paxima was originally detained near Jalalabad for asking suspicious questions of a special forces team sweeping the area for terrorists. I wondered how much of that suspicion had resulted from simply being a single woman out and about. Whatever Paxima had said or done resulted in a 3-year prison sentence without due process. Habeas corpus be damned. It always looked good to pick up potential terrorists. Fuel for officer evaluation report bullet points. There was no such thing as innocent until proven guilty. Some were undeniably guilty, but the detainee vetting process was exhaustive, which meant detainees were kept for months or years waiting for a decision. Sometimes the criminal resumes were a little thin. The word of a local farmer that his neighbor was a terrorist was taken as gospel and destined to go into top secret missives funneled upward where high numbers and probative criminal value were treasures more precious than time off. Paxima hadn't been interrogated in many months. Her story was always the same. She entered the room in shackles and smiled at the food and tea, lamb, rice, vegetables, naan, date cookies for dessert. The tea was lacking, however. One sip was all it took for her expression to morph from pleasant to puzzled. The translator interpreted. She says, the tea is not nice. It was true. The tea was bitter. My own cup grew cold. I asked her questions, wrote down the same answers dutifully recorded over the years by a series of active duty, reserve, and National Guard interrogators. There was no formal release plan. I was worried. I'd heard the MPs were planning on just dropping her off somewhere. I decided to speak with Sergeant Grimes, who seemed somewhat approachable, maybe enough to at least get a smirk from him before he blew me off. So you'll be dropping her off in her neighborhood? Grimes threw me an amused look. Sure, at her front door, just like a taxi. I didn't mean that, but you're at least going to the town you found her in? Grimes loosened his backpack straps and slid it off his back. He placed it against the wall, stood up and massaged each shoulder. Look, I'm not trying to be an asshole here, but she won't tell us where she lives. Oh, and by the way, I didn't find her. That was way before my time. Can I go? Grimes grabbed his backpack and sauntered off. He briefly turned to yell, I doubt it. I didn't get to go. It wasn't the MPs. It was my CO, my commanding officer, who said, everyone wants to get outside the wire. You've been out plenty of times. Give someone else a chance. As if whether I went affected anyone else. A zero-sum game. But nonetheless, I couldn't help imagining what might happen. After the Humvee drops her off, Proxima waves to the soldiers. They don't wave back, just back up quickly, executing a U-turn which kicks up dust that settles into her hair. It's cold. She clasps the burqa around her clumsily. She hasn't worn one in years. She nimbly dodges vehicles, eventually managing to cross the street, where she huddles by a vendor selling rubber sandals. Proxima's head covering is askew. It's a concern. She shades her eyes with her hands, spotting something, and jiggles a bit in place to keep warm. The sudden movement on a street where people hurry and don't linger draws attention. The air is charged. A couple of men walk by, their pace quickening, as if alarmed at the sight of this odd woman, scary as hell. I like to think, at this point, someone stops and recognizes her, extends a helping hand. There are good people here, like everywhere. I used to think I was one of the good people, but now I'm not so sure.
Great, great. Thank you so much. William Smutko served in the U.S. Army from January 1967 through 1973, and with the Infantry Division in Vietnam from November 1968 through October 1970. He was a fishing guide in Saskatchewan and a guide and outfitter in Montana, and is a retired wine grape grower. Welcome, William.
Good evening. These are excerpts from my short story, Conflict. It makes sure you understand that this story takes place over 36 hours. The light observation helicopter has been flying 10 to 15 feet off the ground to avoid detection. Near the starting point for the mission, the pilot slips the chopper in near a tree line a couple of feet off the ground. I jump out with my rifle and gear and disappear into the tall rotor wash grass. The chopper leaves, but the kerosene smell of its jet exhaust lingers. Motionless in the grass for 30 minutes, fighting the adrenaline rushing through my body, I make the sign of the cross and silently pray. Heavenly Father, keep me safe on this mission and give me the strength and will to perform it. I move steadily forward 1/2 inch at a time. I can hear other creatures moving through the grass near me. My belly reminds me that I've had nothing to eat or drink since early this morning. Again, I lock it out of my mind. My focus, the objective. Lord, strengthen my will. I lie down in the muck of the rice paddy and rest my rifle across the top of the dike. Put the crosshairs of the scope on the spine between the shoulders of the closest VC. Center my breathing and squeeze the trigger. The VC goes down. I move to the next and repeat the process. I kill 3 of them before they understand they are under attack and find cover. When it's over, my hands start to shake and I take it, and it takes all I have to keep my breakfast down. They are my first kills. The platoon leader, point squad and I walk up on my 56th kill. The VC has been carrying a rocket-propelled grenade launcher and 2 RPGs, but he is a boy of about 10. I'm not successful keeping my lunch down this time. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, I say over a quivering chin in the dim confines of the confessional. My last confession was over 2 months ago. My shoulders slump and my head hangs down. Since then, I've been with prostitutes several times, gotten drunk 10 times, and killed 56 people. An embarrassed silence hangs between us for several minutes. My son, the priest seated behind the screen, finally says, "In the heat of battle, how can you possibly know how many people you've killed?" "I'm a sniper, Father," I snap back. "When I pull a trigger, I see him go down. I see the surprise on their faces when the bullet hits. For your penance, say 5 Our Fathers and make 10 acts of contrition." A little after dark, I see him move from a dike toward the tree line. The Stylight scope's crosshairs are on the VC's chest. The fingers of my right hand start to tingle. I continue squeezing the trigger and watch as the VC crumbles into the mud. Number 57. The M14 nestles into my shoulder and the scope aligns with my right eye. I look through it and count 15 VC. The crosshairs settle on the one in front and I gently squeeze the trigger. My trigger finger starts going numb as I move the scope to the rear of the formation. Kill the last 2, then dissolve into the bush. There is no feeling in my trigger finger at all as I crawl through the leaves and twigs of the jungle floor. Numbers 58, 59, and 60. Scores of ants have crawled into my clothing and are biting my chest and waist. Enemy soldiers are moving around within 50 yards of me. The adrenaline rush brought on by their proximity paints over the thirst, discomfort, and pain. I continue working my way toward the grass-covered rise I will shoot from. More and more soldiers are moving around. About 25 yards from the shooting spot, 2 NVA soldiers walk within 3 feet of me. My adrenaline pumps faster. The sun is hovering over the trees to the west when the general comes out of the command center and heads for his quarters. I pick him up in my scope. The general calls out and a woman and 2 teenage children come out of this tent. I concentrate on the general. I can see the mustached lips lift into a large smile and put the crosshairs on the general's heart. Center my breathing and try to squeeze the trigger. My right hand refuses to respond. None of the fingers on it will move.
Thank you so much. Great job. And thank you, all of our readers. Let's give them a virtual round of applause again. It was wonderful. Thank you all so much. Just wonderful work. We'll be moving into the panel discussion now. So I would like to introduce the moderator of that, Jason Poudrier, a 2018 Pat Tillman Scholar and a Purple Heart recipient of the Iraq War, is a multifaceted literary figure. He currently serves as the Arts and Humanities Administrator for the city of Lawton. His pursuits include being a novelist, essayist, poet, and PhD candidate in English education at the University of Oklahoma. With accolades for his poetry collections Red Fields from Mogrel Empire Press and the chapbook In the Rubble of Our Feet from Rose Rock Press, his literary contributions have graced publications like World Literature Today and Blue Streak. His fiction has also gained recognition, including being a runner-up for Kibiji's 2019 Macaron Prize and earning finalist and honorable mention distinctions in various contests. Let's have a virtual welcome round of applause for Jason and the other panelists.
All right. Thank you so much, James. The legacy of Proud to Be and, publishing and, the stories of veterans and family members and, really bring them to life because there's nothing more authentic than, those stories that are written by those who have lived it. But to start us off, we just have a diversity of panelists, not just, male and female, but military branch as well as, service member and family member. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go through and like I said, Sin, you're first on my screen. Just kind of tell a little bit about your connection to the military and how that kind of influenced this piece.
Thank you, Jason. My primary connection with the military is that my son enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. My father was also in the Navy, and I have a sister who served as well. But the major impact for me was when my son enlisted, and throughout his entire enlistment, the whole 4 years, I spent a lot of time sort of writing through the travails of what that experience was like as a mother, and trying to give expression to the anxieties, I think, and to give expression to the fears that I endured, that it turns out most parents do. And so being able to document the experience as it was for me, but also to kind of document his progress through that 4 years serves as a reminder for me, but it also was just very therapeutic in the process, and was beneficial to me in lots of ways for coping.
Thank you. And so we actually got to meet the panelists and I last night in a rehearsal. And one of the things, Sin, that you shared is that you hadn't shared this piece with your son. So is he listening? Is he in our audience tonight?
I'm not sure if that one is. I know that at least one of my sons is
Okay.
listening, but I have a feeling he's going to hear about it if he's not here.
Okay, great. Because I was going to ask you like how that might have impacted you as far as the reading goes. And
I have to admit that there was some sense of awareness. It was kind of in the back of my mind, but I'm also proud of his service and proud of what he's done. So it's in his honor.
All right, thank you so much, Sin. So next on my screen is Elaine, and just in your bio, you have Reserve, National Guard, active duty, all the places you've been. And if you both for you and Jillian to discuss, both military and also how that affected your story, but also being a female in the military and giving voice.
Yeah, I first got in the military in 1982, so you can imagine, and I got out in 2008, so you can imagine there was many changes throughout the years. And I think initially, especially in the 80s, I felt like, women felt like they had to be the example, and if one woman did something like, they hated it when women got pregnant, it's a natural thing, but, they freak out. So if one woman got pregnant, some guys would say, oh, all the women are going to get pregnant, even though it really didn't affect them. So, and so, or just, there was assumptions that, you couldn't do the job, and that if you did the job, it was kind of unusual if you could pull it off. And they kind of expected you not to do well. And, there were many kind, men also. So I don't want to paint them all with the same brush. But I did notice there was a bit of that. And but it did improve a bit over the years. But I don't know, it's kind of a man's world. I mean, I know there are more women in the military now, but it's a mostly male dominated world, and you have to adjust to it. It's more important, I guess, for survival for you to adjust to it than for the men to adjust to you, because you're trying to get along with the majority.
Yeah. And I think too, like, so you talked about being an interrogator, and if you could share kind of a little bit about that experience, about how they saw you over there as well, this female figure in uniform.
Yeah, I mean, they were used to it. Like the prisoners we spoke to, they were kind of used to it because there had been previous deployments with women there. But I still think they thought it was a little weird. And there was kind of a hierarchy of who you could speak to, and they had FBI and CIA there, so they're the high value people are doing that. We were mostly talking to farmers and stuff, and they just wanted to go home, most of them, and so they weren't gonna say anything to me that was, anti-woman or anything. They were just gonna, they wanted to get out of there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Thank you. Jillian, your piece is a fiction piece, and you have this very strong, female protagonist. If you want to tell us, both a little bit about your service, and then kind of how that shaped the writing of the story.
Mhm. No, thank you, Jason. And thank you, as others have said, to Missouri Humanities for assembling this really important forum tonight. I think there is an awareness, both myself and, to say by extension, my main character, that, women in the military today were beneficiaries of the early service, women such as Elaine and others. And yet there still are those tensions at work. In my own service, I served for 10 years in the U.S. Navy. I was an officer, service worker officer, spent some time as a reservist thereafter. And one of my favorite, not that I should play favorites, but one of my favorite tours was when I had the opportunity to go back to the Naval Academy as an English instructor and, get to share in my experience and mentor young midshipmen, and also get to engage directly in the literature. This happened around 2011 and 2012, right at the time when some of the best known work about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan started to get published and gain a lot of critical traction. So I was really in a very interesting position to be studying this and reacting to it as a veteran at the same time. And what I wanted to see more of is, like, where was my story? Where were stories from women in fiction? I had to look really hard, probably harder than I should have, to find these works of literature across the spectrum of poetry, nonfiction, and fiction. So, when I'd always been a writer, I wanted to really commit to telling the stories of women service members, not as they were supposed to behave, but really as they are, with all of their rough edges and sometimes less than savory impulses driving them. Because from my perspective, I think in terms of representation, what's as much of a disservice is not representing someone in literature at all, is showcasing them in too ideal a light than anyone could realistically hope to accomplish. That doesn't show the reality, the complexity, and the nuance that makes literature worth reading, quite frankly, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I think that the canon has gotten more broad, but you're so true. Like when it first came out, you had Brian Turner came out with his poetry collection, Phil Clay with his collection of short stories, but it wasn't until later till we started getting more of a diversity of stories, and it's still improving. I'm so glad that you are bringing into that bringing yourself and your stories into this canon of war stories, and then these authentic characters. So for sure. And next I got more questions going on, but going over to Gordon, you talk about being the military and 77th Army Band, which is here at Fort Sill, but also how many years were you there, and were you in and part of the band, and you said serving in combat. Talk a little bit about that, how that shaped your piece, and then tell us a little bit about this guy named Europe.
Sure. I spent 31 years on active duty service with the U.S. Army, first as a trombone and piano player, and then I became a conductor and administrator. And I served for 2004. I was the commander of the 1st Infantry Division Band when we were in OIF 2. We were into Crit. I did spend 2 years at Fort Sill. I spent a bunch of time different places. One of the things that's, I think, connected me with this poem is, as a ceremonial unit, we have in the Army Band program, we have kind of a role in celebrating and maintaining certain traditions, some of which go back as far as the Revolutionary War, as far as like drill and ceremony and such. But also musically, we cover a very wide spectrum. Of course, there's the marches that were popular in the late 19th century and early 20th century, still very popular, which I played thousands and thousands of marches. I could still, if you asked me to, play the first Ramon part to Stars and Stripes Forever, anytime, day or night. And it's been 30 years since I've played it probably. But also the big band era is also very big because that, is associated with World War II and the soldiers and coming home and the USO and all that sort of thing. The reason I became very interested in James Reese Europe, it was a remarkable man. It's kind of the equivalent of a major pop star today giving up everything and volunteering to go and fight in a war. And of course, he also had the many additional reasons not to do that because he did not have the full benefits of citizenship and respect as a man and as a human being that someone like myself would have enjoyed at the time. And he was just a remarkable guy. I mean, he wasn't well known because he was kind of a transitionary figure between ragtime music, which was very, very popular for decades, and actual Dixieland jazz. And unfortunately, he was very popular in New York City and around the world. Went to France for a year with his band, came back, they toured for a couple months, and he got stabbed by one of his drummers and died tragically. The history of American pop music would have been, I think, very different had he lived. He was only 38 when he died, and I did feel a great connection to him because like me, he had served as commander of a band in combat zone. We were both composers, we were both musicians. Of course, his accomplishments far outstripped my meager ones. But one of the reasons I wrote this poem is anything I can do to get the name of James Reese Europe, and you should look him up on YouTube, on Wikipedia, on Google, and find out about him. Just a really underappreciated American hero.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And like I said, do Google him. I had to Google him because I was like, this poem's great, but who is this guy? And then then I looked him up, and then but Gordon, do not downplay 31 years of service. That is commendable. So one of the things that as I was looking through these pieces and the pieces that we're discussing and the pieces that were discussed or that were shared today by some of the readers that have dropped off is this idea of what if. What if this happened? What if I were to meet this person? What if this was to have happened? And this exploring of it. And then another theme that goes around in the military community is moral injury, where basically we're taught that a person should act one way, and then because of a situation, you have to do something different in order to survive, or to protect oneself. And so there's some exploration of that. And so I want to go first to Elaine, because I want you to talk about how your piece is nonfiction, but you have this large fiction component, but it's nonfiction because it's your thought. And it talked to me about that basically that literary choice you made. And then how that helps you to explore the what if.
Oh, well, thank you. I usually write fiction. So it's, the essays or stuff I do not as often. So I think that it just sort of naturally worked its way into my work, because that's kind of normally the way I write. And I felt kind of like a need to sort of not stop at the interrogation, but what happened to her? And I have no idea what happened to her, but I just, I really wanted, and I'm not sure that was a good ending either, but I felt like there had to be something at the end that, that went beyond just releasing her. There has to be some kind of, finale or whatever, ending.
Yeah. And so and as you go into that, did you see other releases? Because the part that as you visualize this piece, it's so visceral. It's like you can see it, and was that your thoughts at the time, or was that something that has formed over years?
I think about it more now because, they would release people and I don't know how they did it. But it didn't sound like there was some major plan. It just sounded sort of like, we'll just drop them off, and I mean, Afghanistan's kind of it's not a small country. So I don't know. Did they get back to where they were supposed to be? A lot of these farmers, and obviously there were some people that were guilty there. I mean, it was a prison, but some of them were, caught up in local feuds, and farmers would say, "Hey, that guy next door to me, he's a terrorist," and then they would take that guy, and then guess what? The guy next door would take his land. And then it would, affect the family too, because the women, weren't allowed to work normally, not always, but most of the time, and not, lucrative work. So it could really, destroy a family. And so, you worry about if you're keeping people in a facility that long, if they weren't a terrorist going in, are they a terrorist going out?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that a lot as well. And even when you get to the, that last part, saying, I thought I was one of the good guys and now I'm not sure. There are several situations where, I think back, that same statement that you make is like, well, if they weren't one then, what's their opinion of us now? And so with that, and kind of the exploring the what if, Jillian didn't get a chance to read her full piece, and like I said, that's why you got to get a copy of Proud to Be, and read all of it, and and even Elaine and Sins, these were just short segments of the longer pieces. But how did you go about exploring the what if, and then yours is a fictional piece, but reading the dialogue, I mean, I was Army, and I'm like, I heard some of those jokes. So if you
Yeah.
if you tell us about that.
Yeah, it's also the fate of the long short fiction writer, right? You can never write a piece that fits neatly or read, unlike any of us really. But no, people contend with the horrors or the potential horrors of conflict in different ways. I think particularly in the military, because so many of our service members are young. I mean, I think statistics what 80% are under the age of 30 or something insane like that. There's this distancing effect that comes into play. So what I wanted to explore particularly in this piece is what happens to a person's psyche when they attempt to distance themselves from their actions, which they took on either through the realities of combat or combat adjacent situations, as is the case in this story, or just dealing with stressors that they don't know how to communicate or seek assistance from. And what I've observed kind of in life and then in literature is just people do have this tendency to fragment themselves into different sides because of trauma. And as a writer, as a person, that's problematic, but as a writer, I do find that interesting because it's an act of creation at the same time as it's an act of self-defense. You have people literally creating their own stories and realities in order to distance themselves. So, really what I want to explore in this piece was does that look like, especially in an environment that isn't typically acknowledged as being a combat zone, but in the right circumstances can very, very easily have the sarcastic comments of some unruly sailors come back to haunt them in very real ways.
Yeah, no, I think in your piece you do a wonderful job of, you're paralleling the physical action of what's happening in the situation, and then this mental, like you said, fragmentation that the protagonist is trying to sort out as they're, going through this live action scenario of life and death. And so it's wonderful. And so in one point in your story there is some death, and then one of the soldiers I love, poses the question, so what do you think about the joke now? So what do you think the protagonist thinks of the joke, and what do you think of the joke?
Yeah. It's when the joke stops being funny, I think, to everyone involved. It's when the violence becomes real, and I'm not going to give away my own ending.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's at a certain point in time, I think, sublimated violence becomes explicit in certain circumstances when people feel as if they've crossed the threshold with their actions, that there's almost nothing left to lose.
Yeah. No, I think, thank you for that answer. And I think that's really, you have almost this, like these like jokes of just kind of like trying to like stay sane in a situation. And then you have a situation, and it's like it's so true. It's like, okay, at this point, this is the life, now tomorrow, a week later, this is how we're going to get through it. But in the moment, it's like, yeah, there is no joke about this loss or this situation.
Yeah.
So
the attempted distance is gone. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna jump over to Sin, and kind of the same question of how you kind of shaped the the what if, and how that kind of helped you to kind of explore and make sense of the situation.
I think for me, the most difficult aspect of the what if was finding the courage to face the what if as a parent whose firstborn was heading off into a really unfamiliar and scary and life-altering situation, and finding the words to be able to acknowledge that the worst case scenario in my mind would be losing him in a combat situation. And or even, I mean, we have lots of vets who endure terrible injuries and somehow find it in them to keep going. And for me, that's what it was. It was finding the courage to finish that sentence, to finish what if this does happen, what then? And being able to talk about it even to myself or to the blank page was elemental to my sanity, and being able to get through it without becoming pathological about it.
Yeah, and I think that's why your piece, there's a lot of participants were commenting on how powerful it was, because I think so many of them kind of went through that. And I remember going into what Jillian said about 80%, under 30. When I served, I was 18, 19 years old. I was a single soldier, which means I didn't have a family, supposedly. I very much so have a mom and dad. And your piece really tugged at me, because I'm like, wow, I put my parents through that. So we only have about 2 or 3 minutes left. I feel like we could continue the discussion almost indefinitely. You guys are amazing, and I enjoyed all of your pieces, and I'm thankful for Missouri Humanities for having us and putting this together. But thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over back to the Humanities.
All right. Thank you, James, for all the great introductions, and to our readers and panelists for taking the virtual stage tonight. And special thanks to Jason for his ongoing support of PTB and for moderating tonight's discussion. It means a lot. Thanks to all who have attended in support of our veteran writers and for being a part of the conversation. Just a reminder, take a few minutes to fill out our survey whenever the screen ends. We would love to hear your thoughts about tonight's events, and I'd love to share that with our readers. We encourage you to stay in touch with us by following us on social media at Mo Humanities. Become a member, join our email list on our website. Stay in touch, mohumanities.org. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this evening and that you feel inspired to pick up your very own copy of PTB and hear more of these stories in their entirety. Thank you again for joining us. Have a lovely evening, everybody. Thank you so much.